Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mario Cristobal, the Miami Hurricanes, taking the podium for ACC Media Days. And look, I had tempered expectations in terms of how much we were going to learn about these programs rolling into 2025. And I ain't going to get up here and say that we learned a ton about Miami, but there are a couple of storylines that emerged that I think should fire up a lot of Miami fans. Now, before we even get nitty gritty with some of the players on this roster and talking Carson Beck, I want to start with this. And this was probably what fired me up, number one on the list. Mario's not satisfied with what happened in 2024. And I've spent probably too much time listening to these other head coaches take the podium during media days and basically get up there and try to sell that they're doing a good job and they shouldn't be on the hot seat heading into 2025. That was not the approach that Mario Cristobal took when he was talking to the media. Now, look, rightfully so. I think he recognized the progress that this program has made. Coming off a 10-win season, that was the first time since 2017. Miami's only done that twice since I believe 2004. You can recognize the trajectory of where this program is going. 10 wins in 2024, double-digit NFL draft picks. It's very clear that this program's going in the right direction. But what stood out to me the most was there was not a lot of, hey, we won 10 games last year. It was a lot more of, hey, we didn't finish the job in 2024. I did not come to Miami just to win 10 football games. I came to Miami to compete and win ACC championships and go out and compete for national championships as well. And it's not just lip service when Mario Cristobal is talking about it. Go look at what Mario Cristobal and Miami did in the transfer portal over the last couple of months. There was a lot of good aspects about this Miami football team in 2024, no doubt about it. But there were some serious problems. Mario was hell bent on addressing those problems rolling into 2025. We think he did so going into 2025. It's not just lip service, it's with action. The standard for Miami under Mario Cristobal, I think, is it's noticeably different. And that was the thing that got me excited the most was, look, we are happy with where we are going, but we are not there yet. We didn't finish the job in 2024. It's a lot different than a lot of these head coaches getting up there and just kind of resting on their laurels and really pointing back to their successes. Mario Cristobal is much more focused on what needs to be fixed and where we're going over the next couple of years. That's what excited me the most. Now, I want to get into a few other storylines about some players that I found intriguing as well. Before we get into it, as always, to the Miami fans, appreciate you guys. Y'all know how excited I am rolling into 2025. I think this is the best roster that Miami has had in a very long time going into the 2025 year. Been a blast breaking it down. Going to be a blast talking about it during fall camp. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, number two here. Are we sleeping on CJ Daniels? I think the national media, it is such a freaking lazy narrative, and so many people kind of really play into it where it's like, does Carson Beck have the weapons on the outside? Is this pass catch room good enough? And look, is that a fair question to ask? Yes. Are we focusing on it probably too much? Yeah, also probably true. I mean, go back at Carson Beck's weapons at Georgia. He had 79 targets went to Arian Smith. 75 targets went to Dylan Bell. Look, Miami's trying out better wide receivers than what Carson Beck was throwing to at Georgia. It ain't no doubt about it from that 2024 year. But I think more importantly, we've been so infatuated, and partially because CJ Daniels was working through an injury during spring. So you didn't hear a ton about CJ Daniels. We've talked a lot about JoJo Trader, a lot about Malachi Tony, and I'm excited, as just about anybody, for both of those young cats going into 2025. I think JoJo Trader has a great chance at being the wide receiver one. Do we need to start talking about CJ Daniels? And the reason that I say that is, look, one thing I've learned in media days, listen to the players more than you listen to the coaches. The coaches are very used to getting up in front of a microphone and giving you the coach speak. And Mario Cristobal is as good of it as anybody about it in terms of being cryptic, kind of close to the vest. The players will tell you how it is. And the one guy that Carson Beck singled out in the pass catcher room was CJ Daniels. Now, he might not be as exciting as a guy like JoJo Trader or Malachi Tony, the ceiling maybe might not be as high. Although I think it's important to remind everybody the way we were talking about CJ Daniels 12 months ago before he took the football field for LSU was, hey, that's an NFL dude. That's a guy that's going to go in the NFL draft in the 2025 NFL draft. Now, did not really get the targets and the opportunities, you might say, as many people, including the LSU fans, expected. I mean, I would go back to CJ Daniels and say, hey, this is a guy that has caught for over 2,400 yards in his career, 21 touchdowns at LSU, although the production wasn't what many of us expected. 75% completion percentage when targeted, did not drop a single pass for that LSU offense last year. There is a very real chance that CJ Daniels could be the wide receiver one in this offense. But regardless of that, the thing that fired me up the most was he's the he's the leader in the room. And what is a really young room? Guys like JoJo Trader and guys like Malachi Tony, they're going to be playing a lot of football, but it's very clear that CJ Daniels during that spring portion was the guy that was commanding that wide receiver room. So he's potentially a wide receiver one. It sounds like he might be going into 2025, but also a guy that's kind of bringing this unit together. Carson Beck described him as the glue guy, probably flying under the radar going into 2025, especially early in the season when maybe you want to count on your veterans more. Well, guys like Malachi Tony and JoJo Trader are getting their feet wet. We've talked about it all the time. Like Miami don't have time to get their feet wet. CJ Daniels might be the go-to guy for Carson Beck against Notre Dame week 1. And I think we're hearing all the right things about CJ Daniels. Number 3, and I think this is very clear, and we've been talking about it for a majority of the offseason. The engine of this offense, as much as the national media wants to talk about Carson Beck, and look, I'm as big of a Carson Beck fan as anybody. And he is fully healthy. The engine of this offense is the offensive line. Last year it was Cam Ward. Last year it was the pass catcher. There ain't no question about that. This offensive line is not only really talented, like a bunch of guys that I think will go high in the NFL draft. Francis Mauigoa is probably going top 10. Inez Cooper's going in the NFL draft at some point. Probably say the same thing for James Brockermeyer. Markel Bell Sneaky might be a top 50 NFL draft pick too. It's really talented, but it's really deep as well. That is very clearly how Miami is separating themselves in the ACC, and quite frankly, separating themselves at the top of this sport, regardless of conference. There's not a lot of programs that have the bodies and the depth that Miami does on the offensive line. It's a very difficult position to maintain your depth with, and I think Miami's done a phenomenal job of it over the last couple of years. A bunch of guys in the 2 deep that probably won't play for Miami that much in 2025 that probably would be high-end starters for a lot of other programs across the country. You got really good running back room, very clearly a lot of confidence with your offensive line. People need to start talking more about it. I get it's flashy to talk about the quarterbacks, and I get it's flashy to talk about the pass catchers. When we talk about does Carson Beck have enough around him, to me it starts with a run game that Georgia didn't have for Carson Beck in 2024. Miami going to have that for Carson Beck in 2025. Ain't nobody talking about it. Going to the defensive side of the football, look, there's a lot of conversation around the scheme and what Corey Heatherman's going to bring. And this ain't me letting Lance Guidry off the hook. That was one of the more poorly coached defenses I've seen in a very long time, especially in the month of November. But when you talk about a defense being good, not great, or great, not good, and when you talk about this defense getting better going into 2025, look, I'm just going to assume Corey Heatherman's a solid defensive coordinator. It's about the Jimmies and Joes. Go look at all the best defenses in the country. You don't talk about scheme when you're talking about Georgia's defense, or when you're talking about Michigan's defense, or when you're talking about Ohio State's defense. You don't talk about scheme. You talk about the dudes that just win up front and the guys who are the game wreckers. That's the conversation that I think is most important for Miami. And I'm listening to these players talk and saying, hey, who are the guys that are getting some shout outs? Akeem Mesidor, down 20 pounds. It sounds like he's going to be a lot more. He played a lot of 3-tech last year, and that was obviously not really Akeem Mesidor's strong suit. The thing with Akeem is he's always been a good football player when healthy. I think he's one of the most underrated football players on this roster. But what I think's always held him back a little bit is he's always been a tweener. Maybe a little big to be an edge defender, probably a little bit small to play on the inside. Well, dropping 20 pounds, hey, we're very clearly an athletic edge rusher in 2025. Getting Akeem Mesidor consistently in the right spot and letting him go be a game wrecker for this Miami Hurricanes defense, really, really important. I don't think it's crazy to talk about Ruben Bay and Akeem Mesidor being one of the better edge rusher duos, not just in the ACC, but in the country in 2025. Hearing all the right things about my guy, Akeem Mesidor. Number two, how about Armando Blunt, who I think can give you a lot of versatility? I've talked a lot about potential concern about Miami and how much depth they have in the middle of that defensive line. Look, Armando Blunt probably plays first and second down as an edge defender. I think has the size and horsepower to maybe kick into that three tech in some of those pass first situations. He's going to play and he's going to be important, and his ability to move him along the defensive line going to be really important for Miami. And that's kind of the storyline for me on defense. It's like the year two defensive lineman. We've said it all off season, whether it's Armando Blunt, whether it's a guy like Justin Scott, whether it's a guy like Marquise Lightfoot, who we're quietly hearing some really good things about, whether it's a guy like Cole McConaughey. Miami's got some dudes that are going into year two that were probably not quite ready year one, but are ideally going to be ready in year two. Look, if Miami takes a massive step on the defensive side of the football, these year two defensive linemen are going to take a massive step. That's where the ceiling of this defense comes into play. How about Kamal Bonner? He also got some love. A little bit more of an athletic linebacker, of which Miami struggled with last year. Mario Cristobal mentioned versatility. That's really important. Like, Miami didn't have that last year, especially in the back end. I mean, you look especially at the safety position. I look at Zachariah Poyser, a guy that can hold up in man coverage as a nickel, a guy that can play the deeper third as a high safety, can come up into the box and support the run. Didn't have that last year. And not a shot at a guy like Zaquan Patterson, but you simply could not ask Zaquan Patterson to hold up in man coverage. If you ask Zaquan Patterson to play man coverage, we all know how that went. It was bad. And now you have a little bit more versatility. That playbook's a little bit more open for Corey Heatherman because you got a guy like Zachariah Poyser, or you got a guy like Mo Torrey who's really good against the run. Got a guy like Kamal Bonner who's a little bit lighter, a little bit faster, can operate in coverage. Whatever Corey Heatherman wants to do, I feel like he's got the bodies to do so in the 2025 year. Now, again, is it all going to come together immediately for a new DC with a lot of back-end defenders? That's certainly a question, and we're going to find out pretty dang quick against Notre Dame. But I think they finally got the personnel right on the defensive side of the football, especially in the back end. Those were some of the things that I think fired me up the most. But most notably, is this program's not satisfied with how 2024 went. And it could have been really easy for Mario Cristobal just to get up there and give a lot of lip service of, hey, we won 10 football games. We're doing good as a program. Look, recognize the growth, and I'm okay with that. But he ain't going to pretend for a second that that's the standard that he wants at Miami. That's what excites me the most. There are a lot of head coaches that just seem to be comfortable, and Mario Cristobal ain't one of them. Dude's a worker. I love it. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We gonna talk to y'all later. Peace.